Welcome, I'm Ronnie from Ronnie's Garage in Southern California. Today we're holding our monthly tech meet at Ronnie's Garage. Alright, so anyways, we got a immobilizer, so that's probably battery related. Another one, a different case. Now these codes are hard to find and look up, okay? The shop manual for this car is not a paper manual. The wiring diagrams are not paper, big rollout map type wiring diagrams. They're individual circuits. So even if I go to a fuse, this goes back to looking for that draw. If I go to a certain fuse, it does not tell me all the circuits it feeds. That fuse only shows up basically in the fuse panel that tells you one of the definitions. It doesn't tell you all of them. And it'll show up in individual wiring circuits. It's really hard to track electrical issues on these cars. Either that or I'm really stupid.
Largely because of the documentation.
Documentation, yes. Now I have two wiring diagrams for these models, early ones, and they are a rollout map. And I'll do that when we go back inside, and you'll see. It shows every wire and circuit and color and fuse on the car.
I still owe you the Camargue wiring.
That would be nice. I'd like to see that.
I bet you would.
We have a car to restore here.
I know.
An early one.
I know. You need it worse than I do.
Yeah, so anyways, let's go back to where we were.
And it's got fold-outs.
So let's read them again. I forgot what that first one was. Oh, fuel rail pressure switch. So this car, it could be related to the battery, but this car has a sensor in the engine, in the middle of the engine, right where the V's come together. There's this valley down there that has these fuel rails that feed the injectors, and there's a pressure sensor in there. We're going to clear this. We'll see if it keeps coming back on and it's that same code. We got a problem with that thing. They're known to fail. They were unavailable for years until somebody finally made one aftermarket. And they're expensive, and they're hard to get to.
What does it do?
It senses the pressure of the fuel. So,
Does this have breach ring data?
it does. Why'd you say that? So let's see if we can find that before I clear it.
For what he probably paid for it, it should.
This thing, I bought this, how long ago? 10? More than that. Bought this 10 to 15 years ago. It was $4,000 for this thing. So let's see, live data. I wonder if it's in the live data. No, that's running. So let's see in the service. So the service functions on this one, just so you know, it shows circuit tests, all adaptions. So the car, an adaption on an engine management, it is constantly monitoring things on the engine while it's running, and as the engine ages, and every time you start it and turn it off, it kind of relearns, kind of thinks on its feet. So it adjusts as needed as the car ages and wears. So that's an adaptation. So like the fuel mixture, there's the long-term and short-term fuel mixture, trimming. So the trimming is when they have to adjust it a little bit to keep it within emissions range. It'll remember that. And then once it goes beyond the parameters of those adaptions, then it'll flag a code. And that usually means there's something wrong with the car. You know, there's something that's finally given up. EVAP leak test. I've never used this, but EVAP on these is the evaporative emissions. So that when you know how all the gas pumps now have that boot on there and it sucks the fumes, well, that goes in the atmosphere and it causes all kinds of issues. They do the same thing on the car. It's a sealed system, except it has one vent, because you have to vent it because it expands and contracts with temperature. It has one vent that allows fumes out, but it has to go through an activated carbon filter so it doesn't smell like it and it cleans it up. So to test the system, whether it's working, what it does is your car will have to, before, let's say I clear the codes and you take it to smog, it's going to fail until you drive it enough so that it does this leak test, this evaporative leak test. So what it does is it has a pressure sensor on the system, it shuts off the vent and it looks for a pressure change. Okay, so if it doesn't feel a sense of pressure change, it's going to flag an evap code, and usually close to where the problem is. Now, the evap can be a vacuum hose that's broken, it can be a valve that's not shutting or opening, it can be another hose, a vent hose that's leaking, cracked, an O-ring. Not real simple sometimes. Misfire test. Now, that one I've never seen. So, the way these cars sense a misfire, they did a big deal when they went to this OBD2, and that's to let people know that there's something wrong with their car that's causing more emissions. Makes that warning light go on, freaks people out, they think it's going to die, so they have to take it to a shop, and that's our government trying to make sure that cars stay as clean as possible. So when they went to OBD2, they had to figure out some way to know if one cylinder is not firing. Because if one cylinder is not firing, you're going to have a bunch of hydrocarbons, unburned gas going out the tailpipe. Not only that, but you're going to contaminate the catalytic converter. And you drive it long enough with a misfire, that thing's going to melt or catch your car on fire. That's what happens. So the way they went to being able to monitor the misfire is they went to one coil per cylinder. Instead of one coil feeding 12, 6, 8.
That's why they did that?
Uh-huh. Plus, it's more efficient. They can really control it. But no, it's they have to be able to know which cylinder's off to be EOBD2. Okay, so the first onboard diagnostics, OBD1, it couldn't sense that. It still had to check engine light, and it would only flag codes that were like electrical related. It couldn't, like if the oxygen sensor, which senses the fuel mixture going in and out of your catalyst, it senses both, upstream, downstream. If it's out of its parameters, it's going to flag a code. If your throttle potentiometer, which tells the car how much fuel to put in, it tells your transmission when to shift, if that goes out of parameter, it'll flag that code. And typically on those OBD1s, it wasn't stored. So the car had to be in fail mode with that light on before you could determine where it is. Like my 93 Bentley, it has OBD1, but it stores the codes, and you have to use, they're blink codes as opposed to nice numbers that you can read, and then you have to count the blinks. Huh?
You have to cycle the key to get it into diagnostic.
Well, some cars are that. The ease, you press the trip and cancel
My
mode.
Cadillac, it's the
And then you, when it goes in, you flick it again.
climate
and
control
it flashes the
and
next
Yeah.
the button.
It's a sequence of
The
buttons.
buttons for the miles per gallon
Right.
and all that stuff.
Right. So that's OBD1. But anyways, on this one, so that's okay. Well, let's back up here. We can go on tangents for all day long. So the misfiring, they did the coil on. That's how they figured out how to do that. And that'll also tell them if they got an injector that's got a problem. Okay, so if you get a misfire on a cylinder, it doesn't necessarily mean that the coil's bad or the spark plug's bad. It could be an injector. Now, on the injectors, they monitor those too. They I don't know about the new cars. They probably sense current and resistance. But typically, if you've got an injector that's shorted or it has an open circuit, it's going to tell you there's a failure in that. And it'll tell you which injector, which cylinder. Then it's up to the mechanic to determine whether it's a wiring fault or an injector fault or a computer fault. And typically most mechanics, when they say, oh, fuel injector is bad on this one, we need to put a new one in. Yeah. That's just like a doctor saying, oh, you feel that way here? Try this. We'll see if it works. Right? Try this pill. So, now I'm getting political again. So, where are we at here? So that's a misfire circuit. So I don't see a freeze frame on this. How am I going to find that?